Good evening, friend. We're beginning to run out of tales about me, but still, you seek them out. I cannot help but be touched. What tale do you think they have for you tonight?
Moriden Athluan.
Skyrim was not the only land to benefit from the mighty hands of the Dragonborn. Even the distant island of Solstheim, part of the ancient home of the Dunmeri people, was to feel the effects of his passing.
On the roads of Skyrim, Moriden had long been chased and hunted by a cult. This cult served a master whose name had long been lost to legend, the name of Mirak, the first Dragonborn.
Ah, this one. I should have realized.
Seeking only to stop the pursuit of his life, Moriden would travel to Solstheim to seek out this Mirak and silence him forever.
They have that part right, at least.
What he sought was not what he found. Instead, he found an island under siege, a people who moved as in a dream, and a Daedric lord who pulled the strings as a puppet.
Come now, and hear the tale of Moriden Athluan's time among the Skal, and of the fall of Mirak.
One of the shorter tales about me, but an important one. I learned things on that journey. Things that nobody should ever learn about themselves. Most of what they will tell you, well, better than most of their tales. The truth, though, the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. One First Seed, 4th Era, 202. The look on Aryan's face when I dropped off all the gear I'd picked up from the Shivering Isles was priceless. Complete sets of gear and weapons from both the Mazgan and the Aryan, a replica of Jiggalag's sword, not to mention a bunch of other unique items, were spread around the main office waiting to be displayed, and Aryan just sat down heavily, in shock. I don't think he'd given serious consideration to going to the Plains of Oblivion for new displays, but that is certainly on his mind now. Leaving him to deal with that problem, I took off for the Rift to follow up on Marazi's rumor. I could use a nice long ride in real fresh air to help me restore my sanity a bit. I may have been more resistant to the nature of the Isles, as Stada suggested, but that doesn't mean that I was immune to its call. Marazi will be disappointed. I saw no indication of spirits or ghosts, which didn't make the ride to the Rift any less of a pleasant diversion. It has been odd, really. Even when on the Isles, I never felt the need to be doing anything I did not wish to be. I am free, in a way I don't know that I have ever been. That lasted until I was passing Whiterun, when the courier caught up to me. Caselmo over in Markarth has requested my presence. I am not a fan of that city, and seeing Calcelmo is somewhat jarring, knowing how much I've interfered in his love life. Perhaps it is that interference that makes me wish to aid him in a slightly more legitimate way to make up for it. All of the traveling I've done today has eaten up the hours, certainly. Enough so that I realized I wasn't going to reach Markarth before sundown. Rather than try to race the sun, I am stopping in Old Hrolden, near a bridge that crosses the river. It's not much to look at, honestly, but it does seemingly have a bit of history. Though you would never know it from the lack of opulence, this inn once hosted a rather notable figure. Supposedly, Tiber Septim himself. Maybe it's just a way to get a few extra septums from gullible travelers, but I have the septums to spare. I booked the room that he supposedly once slept in for myself. The journey to Markarth tomorrow will be short, and then I can find out what Calcelmo wants and get it dealt with. 2. First Seed, 4th Era, 202. I was woken by the innkeeper's startled scream. I raced from the room, prepared to battle, but found nothing to fight, at least at first. The innkeeper was pointing to the far end of the common room, where a ghost was sitting in a chair as careless as you please. It didn't appear ready to fight, so after I returned to my room and put my armor back on, just in case, you understand, I tried speaking to the ghost. This ghost has apparently been waiting for quite some time for someone called Hjalti to give him his sword in token of being a sworn brother. I still had a sword that looked like it could be made from that era in my packs, not sure why I hadn't gotten rid of the thing, but I figured it was worth a try. I handed the ghost the blade, and both blade and ghost vanished. Strange world. Well, hopefully that solves that problem. Now, off to Markarth. Calcelmo was up early and already working near the Neshuan Zell excavation site, which, as it turned out, was why he needed me. Really for two separate things, but they likely have to do with each other. He sent in an excavation team about a week ago, and they haven't returned. Also, a giant spider that his workers have taken to calling Nime, the poisoned one, had set up just outside the entrance to the ruin proper. The job he's hiring me for is the spider. I'll ask about that other after this is dealt with. One spider won't be much of a challenge, I think. Getting to the spider was not a problem. Neither was killing it. I wonder just how many assume that because it's large it must be hard to kill. It died quickly and easily, exactly the same way that flies don't. Useless things. Before heading back for Calcelmo, I explored the room and found one of his lost expedition, one of the guards, from the read of a note he had on him. Alethius, the dead guard, didn't seem to think much of the expedition's fighting skills, saying that these men and women were more like children with butterfly nets than a group that could remotely defend themselves. Yet, he is the first one I found. Perhaps better than you thought, eh? Rather than go back to Calcelmo, I think I'll just push on and see what happened. I can guess already, but I have some personal bets on some of the ways they likely died. Should be fun to see how close to right I am. After working through the ruin for half an hour, I found the first of the missing expedition. This one was particularly stupid. Finding something he deemed of interest to himself, he remained behind while everyone else moved on. He then later fell prey to Dwemer Ruin Danger Number 1, Falmer Arrowfire. Anyone who proclaims to be an expert on anything Dwemer, but cannot predict that they will likely come under Falmer attack during an excavation, deserves what they get. One less piece of competition for the Explorers Guild. I had no sooner said that when I saw movement on a nearby walkway. Apart from the Falmer, I expected that I would be the only one alive down here, and yet this was clearly no Falmer. Instead, I ended up with a... well... She calls herself a Dwemer specialist. Hopefully she lists Falmer arrow fire as a serious concern. She is also, whether I want her to or not, going to follow me through this ruin, since she's apparently done with Calcelmo being a pain over it. As long as she's quiet and leaves me alone after we're out, fine. I'll cope. I should have just shot her. I found a second member of the expedition dead. This one, according to his journal, fell prey to greed. While the rest of the expedition members moved on, he remained behind to look for working trinkets among the ruin to sell. When the automatons eventually found him, he never had a chance. He was too busy trying to unlock a chest to realize he was under attack. Also, Remiel, the Dwemer specialist, is not quiet. She's been chattering at me almost constantly. I will be getting rid of her as quickly as I can. At least Lydia was quiet for the most part. She understood me. Maybe better than I did myself back then. The third member of the expedition has now also been found dead. More concerned with having something resembling creature comforts than in the dangers that the ruin presented, he tried to create a camp on one of the central room's platforms. He missed the ominous statue of a centurion not far away, as well as the pipework openings that the spheres and spiders use as a transport network. The result was predictable. There remains only one more member to account for, which should not take over much long, I think. If this camp was under attack, then the last one likely didn't get far before the automatons struck him down. The final member was also its leader, and the teacher for the other three I have found dead. Wonderful man, leaving his students behind to cover his escape. I also doubt one of his conclusions. He believed that the only thing keeping Markarth safe from the Falmer here was Nime, and I just can't see that being a true statement. If I can kill that spider with an arrow or two, then there's no reason to think that the Falmer couldn't have killed her as well. They simply didn't want to leave, I think. And why would they? The teacher's journal also mentions a switch somewhere, something he thought would bring the place back to life. Not certain that's something we actually want. The Falmer are one threat, but the automatons would be something else entire. Imagine a large number of Centurions breaking into the city, for example. We made our way clear of the ruin and reported the oh-so-unfortunate death of the spider to Calcelmo, as well as the fate of the expedition's members. He seemed only mildly disturbed by their deaths. I'm guessing they weren't personal acquaintances, or even somebody he'd spent any time really speaking to. With my business done with Calcelmo, I turned to Remiel. To be fair, she does seem to have some idea of what she's talking about. Not a real combatant, though that little spider thing she made seems to help. Perhaps someone that could be of worth to the guild. I spoke with her about it, and seeing some interest, I sent her to Solitude to speak with Marazi and Aryan. I have no need of her with me, but she might be of value to them. 3 First Seed, 4th Era, 202. I read a book last night. Don't look surprised, I'm writing this journal, aren't I? Of course I read books. But this one is stuck in my head in a way that others have not. It was a simple enough title, Sithis, it said upon the cover, and I thought it would be nothing more than a quick treatise on the nature of the... well, you can't really call something that is more an ideal than a being a god, I suppose. But the words within, the explanation of the universe from the perspective given, is somewhat eye-opening. The idea that all of the universe is full of nothing more than imperfect realms makes sense to me. That the Aedra are nothing more than illusions, ideas that Sithis had played with briefly before they escaped his control to avoid returning to the nothing from which they sprang. If all of this is true, then would not returning things to the void, the nothing from which they sprang, be the ultimate act of devotion? The Aedra, then, would be false gods, and Sithis, though not a god in the same sense, would be the force or idea or whatever that would be the truth of this universe. Dark thoughts, in many ways. But I could not shake them from my head. I will need to sort this out. I'll have time. I ride from Morthal today to finish what I began. I will be Thane of that hold as well before the next 2 days are out, I think. It rained the entire way, and after I'd spent a few hours in the tavern in Morthal, it still showed no signs of stopping. The thing about rain is that most people won't stay out in it, so folks who peddle their wares, customers, even those who are looking around, won't be out in it. For my purposes, that's problematic. If they aren't out and about, the chances of learning of a favor or a task I can do for them goes to nearly zero. Going up to a random person's home and knocking, and then asking if they had a random task that needs doing, would not be looked on with favor, I think. So instead, I went to the vendors that had dedicated buildings. I struck a small amount of gold with the alchemist, who reminisced somewhat about a book they had read during their training. I know I likely had a copy of it back at the museum, but that would be a fair bit to ride for it. Still, if it will close the deal of Thanedom here, it would be worth the time. Actually, I need to look into a land purchase here as well. Hopefully with a house on it already, but looking around this city, I'm betting it'll be more a situation like Dawnstar or Falkreath. I spoke with the steward, and it was much as I suspected. The price was decent, and when I was told the parcel of land was within sight of Solitude, just across the delta, I snapped it up. Another waypoint away from prying eyes? Yes, please. Of course, that also means the added need of getting the place built and getting a steward to watch over it. Oh, I imagine the last will be simple. Every place I've been made Thane of has provided me a housecarl, so I imagine the same will be true here. So I need to find this book for the alchemist, make arrangements for the home to be built, and then, hopefully, claim my new power here. Morthal isn't a large hold, but it is full of people who prefer to remain unnoticed. People that the other holds will underestimate, I think. A shrewd mer should be able to take advantage of that, certainly. I made my way to what will be Winstad Manor when it is finished being built, and though I could only barely make out the blue palace through the rain and fog, I can tell that in clear weather the view will be quite good. Even better, it's out in the middle of nowhere on the edge of a swamp, which means it will be left alone. I made some notes to pass on to some of the locals I intend to hire to build the place. On the way back, though, I got lucky. I came across a bandit camp, which I'd actually tried to avoid. They, however, spotted me and decided that I looked like an easy mark. They quickly learned otherwise. In the now abandoned camp, I found a copy of the book I needed as well. I can only figure that one of those I just killed was their version of a hedge doctor, trying to make what they could to keep the band healthy in the wilderness. Maybe a bit of a stretch to call it coincidence, but I'll not argue. I returned to Morthal just before sunset, managing to get into the alchemist shop just before it closed for the evening. She was grateful for the book and taught me a little bit more about alchemy. Much of it I had already known, but there were a few things she mentioned that I'd not figured out yet, and I imagine this will make my own efforts more powerful. My work for her done, I made for the inn. It is, I imagine, too late in the evening to start contracting labor for the house to be built, and certainly too late in the evening to be pestering my future Jarl about being made a noble of the hold. Tomorrow morning would be soon enough. I almost regret the decision to stay in the inn, though. There was a new bard here tonight, and I'm uncertain why the innkeeper allows him to stay. Lurbeck, the so-called bard, has a voice that could peel the paint off of a building at 100 yards, and a face that could inspire nightmares in a worshipper of Vermina. Why would the Bardic College ever allow this Orzamer to represent them as a product of their teachings? Honestly, I'm surprised that some enterprising individual hasn't arranged for his accidental death. 4 First Seed 4th Era 202. I'd barely escaped the inn when I was almost attacked by the courier. I swear, his ability to find me borders on the mystical. If I didn't know better, I'd think him a Daedra. His delivery was a note from Calcelmo. Not long after I left yesterday, he sent another expedition in, and they found something unusual. A large cache of snow elf artifacts, something that hasn't been seen before in Dwemer expeditions. He, along with most other researchers, had always assumed those had been melted down by the Dwemer. Now, with proof that this may not always be so, Calcelmo would like to talk to me about going to some of the other Dwemer ruins to look for more. Which means running back to Markarth, of course, but I have to admit, this sounds interesting. The potential for growing the museum displays on the snow elves would be huge. After I deal with matters here in Morthal, I think I'd be a fool not to head back and see what the old researcher has in mind. After making some deals and placing some orders, Winstead Manor should be worked on and completed sometime in the next month. It'll cost me, but it'll be worth it. The same privacy and distance that makes it expensive for the materials and labor costs are what makes it worth the effort. With those deals made, I returned to speak with Jarl Ingrid. I caught her just as she was about to send for me, it seems, and for the reasons that I had hoped. The events surrounding Morvarth had already all but assured that I was known in the hold, but my purchase of land, and showing a willingness to continue serving in the area, convinced her that I would be an ideal member of her court, such as it is. I think, actually, I may be the only Thane she has. I thanked her and then met with my new housecarl, a former member of the Morthal Guard called Valdemar. He'll be heading out to the construction site to oversee the work and then take over as steward of the place. A good day's work. And the day is barely half over. Which means I have time to ride for Markarth and try to meet with Calcelmo again. I hate that I seem to be so involved in that old man's life. This task of Calcelmo's is far larger of one than I had anticipated. But the rewards are as great as I had thought. There are 3 leads to follow when in Winterhold, requiring from some research in the Arcanum, another that seems to indicate a need to look into the Temple of the Divines in Solitude for its trail, and the 3rd is the ruin called Erkenthand. A great deal of traveling and researching indeed. Fortunately for Calcelmo, I don't have any plans that couldn't be put off just now. After some consideration, I decided to start with the Winterhold lead. I've been developing my magical skills since I left them, and have been meaning to see about learning a few more things anyhow, even if I don't plan on being an active member of the college, so now seems as good a time as any. It'll be late when I get there, but I should be able to make the college this evening even. I spent a great deal of the evening once I arrived in the company of the archivist. Not the best of conversationalists, but when one is trying to hunt down esoteric information that most have either forgotten about or never knew about to start, you can't get much better. My own forays into the stacks were less than useful, but with his help I started to get better clues. Eventually, though, even those ran dry. Then a random comment about the Synod was made, and it came to light that when they had visited those months ago, they had borrowed a volume or two that might have been relevant. I don't recall seeing any of their corpses with any books, but I don't want to challenge the archivist's memory either. Which means another trip to Mazulft to see if I missed something. 5 First Seed, 4th Era, 202. Before leaving the college, I met with Feralda. Apart from a large number of spells on offer for the learning, which I spent a considerable amount of coin on, she also admitted that there wasn't much more about the Destruction School that I could be taught here. She had rumors, ideas, but nothing solid, which means that I am mostly on my own now. Mostly. There was a book she handed me, one she'd not been able to make much of. Supposedly it leads to some kind of spell in the Destruction School, but what it is or how this book could get me there, she couldn't say. She left it with me to study. Had she traveled much in Skyrim, she might have known what the book referred to, as I did once I read it. The description is a place near Dawnstar, a location I have passed several times in recent months. I'll need to see the location to know for certain what I am to do, but I know this has to be it. I rode to Dawnstar and the Windward Ruins. There, apart from a pair of skeevers, I found a pedestal. Reading through the book one more time, and hoping I was interpreting the instructions there correctly, I placed the book on that pedestal and then stood back a good dozen yards or so. I took a deep breath, and then flung a fireball at the book. If I was wrong, I had just burnt the only clue to something supposedly powerful in the magic world. When the smoke faded, the book remained, though its cover had changed. When I opened it, a new set of stanzas had appeared. This one was harder to understand, but I believe I know where to look. Unfortunately, that where is near a place I would rather avoid, assuming it has repopulated in recent months. Orphan Rock had a hagraven in residence then, and the place I'm looking for is not far from it. It's even somewhat on the path between where I am and the Rift. And Mazulft. Though there was no new hagraven, at Orphan Rock there were plenty of hags. They proved to be of little skill, and a few hours of hunting them was enough to remove them as a threat. That done, I went further north to Skybound Watch. It took some few moments to locate the stand I was looking for, but once I did, I repeated the same process as Windward, exchanging fire for ice. Again, the cover changed, and again, there was a new verse. This time, the location I seek is in the west, somewhere in the Reach. Not where I'm going for now, but certainly something to keep in mind, as I will no doubt end up in that area when this project of Calcelmo's comes to a conclusion. For now, though, onward to Mazulft. I set up camp near Mazulft preparatory to getting some sleep before entering the ruin in the morning, when I remembered there was a storehouse nearby. If the Synod were smart, which, despite the way I had ended their expedition so easily, must be admitted to, then they would have left a small storage area behind. They were expecting to find artifacts of power, after all, and an area to examine everything they found would make sense. On entering, I noticed a passageway I hadn't seen when I had been here before with the ghost of Catria, and it led to a spider-infested hole in the ground. There, strung up from the ceiling, was the corpse of a Synod mage. I made a quick search of the desiccated corpse and found a key. Retreating back to the main room, I did locate a single chest that was locked. Within was a book that, at last, gave me a good lead. Back to Alftend. Again. The place seems to be full of things I somehow missed my first time through. I'll travel back there tomorrow. It's still late enough that some sleep does seem to be in order.